They called him the Napoleon of Sudan, a brilliant military strategist and fearless warrior who unified the tribes and territories of what is now Guinea under his Wassoulou Empire. He was Samori Touré'S, a legendary leader who valiantly resisted the French colonial conquest of West Africa in the late 19th century. His very name struck fear into the hearts of the French as he handed them defeat after humiliating defeat on the battlefield. This is the epic tale of an African hero who chose to fight for his people's freedom rather than submit to foreign domination. A story of courage, resistance, and the struggle to maintain independence in the face of overwhelming odds. Listen closely, for the thundering hooves of Samori's cavalry still echo through the centuries. Our story begins in 1830 in the village of Manyamba Walila, part of the Camara Empire in what is now southwest Guinea. It was here that Samori Touré'S was born into the Camara clan, a family of modest farmers and traders. As the second of 5 sons, young Samori helped tend the family's crops and livestock from an early age. Yet he possessed a keen intellect and unquenchable thirst for knowledge that set him apart. Samori's mother, Seren Bakadeo, was a devout Muslim who instilled in her son the principles of their faith: discipline, honor, justice. She taught him to read and write Arabic, opening his mind to ideas that transcended the confines of their small village. As the years passed, Samori became known for his exceptional memory, rapidly mastering subjects like history, geography, and military strategy. When Samori reached adolescence, his father sent him on a journey to learn the family's trading routes and build his skills as a merchant. The young man thrived in this role, developing a reputation as a savvy negotiator and meticulous record keeper. But fate had much greater plans in store for the precocious teenager. In 1848, the kingdom of Karta invaded the region, destroying Samori's village and killing his mother and 2 of his brothers. Orphaned and homeless at 18 years old, Samori and his remaining siblings sought refuge with their mother's relatives, the Bezedogu people. It was here that Samori's anger toward the injustices he witnessed firsthand began to fuse with his religious beliefs and strategic mind. Under the tutelage of his maternal uncles, Samori honed his skills as a hunter, warrior, and military tactician over the next decade. His natural leadership abilities and courage impressed the Bezedogu chiefs, who inducted him into their elite cavalry scouts called the Safas. Samori's rise through the ranks was meteoric. By age 30, he was the leader of the Safas, commanding raids and expanding the territory under Bezedogu control. However, Samori grew increasingly dismayed by the slave trading practices of his adopted clansmen. As a devout Muslim, he recognized the fundamental injustice of enslaving members of one's own faith and race. This planted the seeds of Samori's ambition to found a new empire free from the scourge of slavery and united under Islamic and traditional African principles. In 1882, Samori made his move, breaking away from the Bezedogu with a coalition of loyal soldiers. Branding themselves as Masara, those ready to die for their cause, Samori's forces swiftly overran the territories of rival chieftains in the region. Though outnumbered, Samori's brilliant cavalry tactics and strategic maneuvers allowed his guerrilla army to decisively defeat larger opponents. Through a series of conquests between 1882 to 1887, Samori Touré'S unified the territories of modern Guinea and forged the Wassoulou Empire, named after the region's primary ethnic group. His empire stretched across a vast swath of West Africa, from the Siguiri Basin in the north to the watershed of the Niger and its tributaries in the south. At the heart of the new empire was Samori's capital at Bisandugu, a fortified city with high walls, underground grain reserves, and a permanent army. This military force was supplemented by Samori's elite cavalry, the Sofas, who could strike deep into enemy territory before melting back into the countryside. The emperor was known to lead these lightning raids himself, embodying the principles of leading from the front. While forged through military conquest, the Wassoulou Empire was no mere brutish regime. Samori instituted a remarkably progressive system of administration and taxation. The empire was divided into military provinces overseen by governors appointed directly by the emperor. These officials handled tax collection, security, and the maintenance of roads and infrastructure within their districts. In keeping with his Muslim faith, Samori outlawed the slave trade and European-manufactured alcohol, while also restricting social vices like drug use and theft. Access to education was expanded, with students from across West Africa traveling to study in Wassoulou schools. The emperor maintained his own elite cadre of advisors, recruiting the brightest minds to serve as ministers and provincial administrators. Justice under Samori's rule was based on a blend of Islamic law and traditional African legal concepts. Punishments for crimes were harsh, yet applied equally, regardless of a person's social status or ethnicity. The emperor himself held regular audiences where civilians could directly petition him for redress of grievances. Trade and economic development were high priorities. Samori instituted policies to encourage agriculture, industry, and commerce both within his empire and with foreign partners. Markets thrived in Wassoulou cities, selling goods brought by caravans from across the Sahara and interior Africa. The emperor minted his own currency and levied taxes on certain trade goods, funding his military endeavors to expand the empire further. At its peak in the late 1880s, Samori's Wassoulou Empire was the largest unified state in West Africa, with a population of over 3 million people from many ethnic groups and creeds. While an Islamic state at its core, the empire also incorporated certain traditional customs and beliefs of its diverse citizens. Samori's vision fused the old and new, forging an African identity and culture of resistance against the existential threat of European colonization. By the dawn of the 1890s, the French colonial forces were rapidly expanding their foothold along the coast of West Africa. Their sights were set on the interior regions, with plans to establish a rail link between Senegal and Sudan. This ambition put them on a direct collision course with Samori Touré'S powerful Wassoulou Empire. In 1891, a French force marched on the emperor's territory, seeking to overawe the local rulers and force them into submission. Samori mobilized his forces, hoping to strike the first blow at the invaders. His intelligence network had identified a French resupply convoy making its way to the front, providing the perfect target. During the ensuing Battle of Koundian, the overconfident French were ambushed by Samori's cavalry and infantry. In a decisive victory, half the French force was killed or wounded, and the rest routed. Weapons, ammunition, and supplies were seized, strengthening the emperor's forces for the trials to come. This humiliation enraged the French, who mobilized over 10,000 men to humble Samori once and for all. Led by the ruthless Colonel Louis Archinard, this invasion force set out from the Senegal coast in January 1892. Samori deftly employed classic guerrilla tactics, avoiding pitched battles while harassing the lumbering French columns with lightning raids. His mobile forces burned villages, fouled water sources, and recruited more soldiers as they drew the imperial troops deeper into the interior's harsh terrain and climate. After months of skirmishing and fruitless pursuit, the French became bogged down and demoralized outside Cancan. That's when Samori sprang his trap in April 1892. Massing his full cavalry and infantry forces of 30,000 men, he encircled the French camp and launched a ferocious attack. In one of the largest pre-colonial battles in West Africa, the fighting raged for 3 days. Archinard's men formed tight defensive squares and depended on concentrated artillery to break the waves of Masara attackers. But Samori's forces employed ingenious tactics, rolling bundles of flaming sticks into the French ranks and stampeding cattle herds to disrupt the cannon fire. On the third day of slaughter, the French finally broke through the encirclement and escaped, but at a horrific cost of over 600 killed and 1,400 wounded. Samori had achieved another stunning victory against a modern, superior European army. The Battle of Cancan broke the will of the French forces to continue their advance. Colonel Archinard withdrew his battered army to the coast while Samori regrouped his men in preparation for the next onslaught. For the victorious emperor celebrated his greatest triumph yet and issued a rallying cry that would echo through the empire. Enraged by their humiliating losses, the French resolved to break Samori Touré'S power once and for all. Over 14,000 troops were assembled for the offensive planned for 1,893, including elite units of naval infantry and Senegalese riflemen. The invasion force marched inland under the burning West African sun, torching every village that defied their orders. Columns of smoke rose in their wake, marking the path of terror and subjugation. At the village of Dabakala, French troops massacred over 500 unarmed civilians as a warning to any who resisted. The offensive soon closed in on Samori's capital at Bisandugu. The emperor had mustered his full military strength, 35,000 infantry and cavalry, bolstered by thousands of armed auxiliaries from allied tribes. Throughout March 1893, Samori conducted a brilliant defense in depth, forcing the French to fight for every inch of ground. His cavalry forces, including the elite Sofas, lashed out to raid French supply convoys, capturing livestock and burning stockpiles. Intense skirmishes raged across the countryside as Samori's infantry battled from concealed positions to blunt the invaders' advance. At the Battle of Diamanco in late March, the French were caught out in the open savannah as Samori massed his full infantry for an assault. Over 12,000 Masara warriors charged the imperial lines. Withering rifle volleys ripped through their ranks, but they pressed on in a suicidal wave. The French only narrowly avoided annihilation when their Senegalese cavalry arrived to stabilize the breach. These were mere delaying actions, as Samori knew he couldn't decisively defeat the French juggernaut head-on. His plan relied on drawing the imperial army deeper into the interior and exhausting their manpower and supplies in the face of a protracted guerrilla resistance. When Bisandugu finally fell in April after a bitter siege, Samori had already evacuated the city and dispersed his forces across the countryside. With the French too exhausted to immediately pursue, the Wassoulou Emperor regrouped his surviving soldiers at the mountain fortress of Gedugu. For the next 2 years, Samori waged a relentless guerrilla war from his mountain stronghold. His cavalry swept across the countryside in daring raids, striking the French supply lines and stripping the land bare. As food and ammunition grew scarce, entire French columns were ambushed and wiped out while trying to find sustenance. Throughout it all, Samori maintained his grip on his far-flung empire through an underground network of messengers and informants. The Masara fighters received a steady influx of recruits and supplies from loyal villages, transported with incredible secrecy. This hidden support network proved essential to Samori's ability to resist, ensuring he always had the resources to strike the French from an unexpected quarter. The Battle of Gedogo in January 1895 marked the high point of Samori's defiance. As French forces closed in on his mountain fortress, the French assembled over 12,000 troops and scores of artillery pieces for an all-out assault. Facing down an overwhelming force, Samori took the initiative, launching a surprise night attack with 30,000 infantry and cavalry. Wave after wave of Samori's warriors crashed against the French lines in a frenzy of hand-to-hand combat. Illuminated by the eerie light of naphtha fire lanterns, the battle raged back and forth with unbelievable ferocity for over a week. In the end, French artillery and superior rifles turned the tide. Samori's remaining cavalry broke and fled the battlefield after taking horrific casualties. His once fearsome army was now spent after years of campaigning, numbering a mere 15,000 exhausted fighters. The French licked their wounds and prepared for a final push in early 1898. This time, over 20,000 troops were deployed to crush Samori's last redoubts. Simultaneously, Separate invasion columns advanced from French Sudan in a pincer movement designed to box in the elusive emperor. If you enjoyed this journey through history with Samori Touré, imagine what more awaits. Subscribe to Stories of Legends for captivating tales of heroes, legends, and unforgettable moments from the past. Hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join us as we uncover the greatest stories ever told. Don't miss out. Your next favorite legend is just a click away.